Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. This week we're talking about film in the 1980s before we watch Raging Bull. One of the biggest things to come out of the 1980s that affects the world of film is the rise of MTV, music television. Instead of having a bunch of new directors go directly into the studio system and start producing movies, some new directors are stepping into producing music videos and directing music videos. And if studios look at a music video and say, wow, that actually looks really good, who directed that? Now they have a shot to go into the big leagues and start producing studio films. So this gives rise to a lot of new directors throughout the 1980s who might have been otherwise overlooked. Another idea that comes out of the 1980s in film is the high concept movie. So for each of these movies, I want you to try and summarize the plot in 25 words or fewer. If you need to pause this to do that, go ahead. Looking at Predator and Alien, they're both kind of similar. In Predator, an alien gets loose in the jungle and starts picking off a team of commandos one by one. Alien. An alien gets loose in a spaceship and the crew has to fight to survive. Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. An archaeologist fights Nazis to save a lost relic. It's very easy to summarize all of these movies, and that is exactly the point. High concept movies have 5 criteria that they have to hit to be considered a high concept movie. First, the premise of the movie has to be original and it has to be unique. It shouldn't be a play off of something that we already did. It should be new and exciting. Second, this should be out there for mass audience appeal. If you hear that 25 words or fewer summary and say, wow, that's really going to make us money, then we have audience appeal and it's apparent. The pitch has to be story specific. We don't want character-driven drama like we had in the 1960s and 1970s as directors were going along with the new wave. We want something that's going to bring in audiences, and the story, not necessarily a character study, is going to bring in audiences. Again, the potential for this movie has to be obvious. It's easy to see why Predator or Alien or Raiders of the Lost Ark would be interesting and engaging for audiences. And again, the last one, your story pitch is only 1 to 3 sentences long. It shouldn't be a big convoluted story. I should be able to tell you what the story is in 1 to 3 sentences, 25 words or fewer. We have a lot of high concept movies throughout the 1980s. Of course, we already said Raiders of the Lost Ark. We have a kind of a swashbuckling hero who carries a bullwhip. He wears a fedora. But again, the story is more important. This main character is fighting Nazis to save a lost relic. And that's really interesting to audiences. Back to the Future. A crazy old scientist turns a DeLorean car into a time machine, and a teenager goes back in time to affect the future. E.T., an extraterrestrial, an alien, gets stranded on Earth and befriends a little boy, and they try to get the alien back home. Again, it's very easy to summarize these things, but with our young audiences throughout the 1970s, throughout the 1980s, the appeal for these movies to those younger audiences is apparent, and they're going to spend money on these films. This also is the decade where we saw the sequel arise. So, of course, we had Raiders of the Lost Ark, but we could also take Indiana Jones and say, okay, well, now he found the Temple of Doom, and now he's going on a crusade with his dad. Or we have Back to the Future. Well, Marty McFly got in the DeLorean, he went back in time, but what would happen if he went to the future? So, what we're doing is we're taking intellectual property, IP, and we're just spinning it in a different direction. We're taking the same characters, we're taking the same premise, but we're slightly changing the story to build off the original story. But now that means that writers already have a character that they can work from. They already have a premise that they can work from. And that makes writing a new story a lot easier. Again, our audiences throughout the 1980s are still in that 12 to 20 range. And with that young audience, they want to see themselves on screen too. And that's where we get action adventure movies like The Goonies, where these 7 kids go try to find a pirate ship full of gold. We have more realism-based movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is a comedy where 3 high schoolers ditch class for the day and basically have a day on the town of Chicago. And the 1980s also sees a rise in slasher horror movies, which often have teenage protagonists who are trying to survive a slasher monster. Again, if you have an audience that is ages 12 to 20, they want to see themselves on screen. They want to see other teenage protagonists that they can identify with. And that's where we get movies like these. We have actors like Molly Ringwald, Anthony Michael Hall, Emilio Estevez, Kiefer Sutherland, who appear in a lot of movies throughout the 80s in teenager roles, so they identify with those audiences. The last big technological shift that we see in the 1980s is the move from physical film to the realm of digital filmmaking. So now we have films that are actually filmed on film stock, but that film stock is ran through a digital coder, which is what this picture is showing. It is showing a time stamp and time signature to show here is the physical reel of film being digitized. And now all of our editing is going to happen on the computer rather than physically cutting the film and gluing or taping it back together to make our edits. Now we can do all of this on the computer, including special effects. And we'll talk about special effects next week once we talk about film in the 1990s. But again, this is a massive technological shift toward what we understand as the movie making process today.